Good morning everyone and welcome to the Cabinet meeting. I'm Councillor Amanda Hopgood, Leader of Durham County Council and Chair of this meeting. The meeting is being broadcast live through our YouTube channel. Before we commence with today's formal business, I'd like to cover some of the housekeeping issues for us all to follow. Please switch off or make silent your mobile phones and all other devices. Keep microphones switched off at all times unless invited to speak by myself as the Chair. When invited to speak, please switch on the microphone nearest to you and introduce yourself. That will move on with the agenda. Item 1, public questions. There are no public questions for this morning's meeting. Item 2, the minutes. Can I have a mover and seconder to the minutes of the meeting on the 16th of October, please?
Yeah, move it, Chair.
Thank you, seconder.
Second, Chair.
Thank you. Can we agree the minutes as a true record? Great, thank you. I can confirm the minutes are agreed. Item 3, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations from members this morning? No. Item 4, council tax base 2025-26 and forecast surplus deficit on the council tax collection fund. Can I invite Paul Darby, Corporate Director of Resources, to present the report, please?
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. In October each year, along with all other building authorities across the country, we submit to government what's called our CTB1 return. That's our council tax base return. And that's used by the government in the local government finance settlement formula and is used as a basis for setting the council tax for the following year. The tax base is impacted not only by the number and mix of domestic properties in the county, but also by who occupies them and what discounts and exemptions they're entitled to. This is why the long-term empty property premiums policy introduced this year and the premiums that will apply to second homes from next year are significant considerations as they impact on our tax base. The tax base is based on the number of Band D equivalent properties that we have across the county. And in setting the council tax base, we need to make prudent assumptions in terms of new builds and any changes in discounts and exemptions over the coming 18 months. The decision taken by Council on the 18th of September to retain the existing local council tax support scheme next year is also a material factor in our tax base setting and forecasting. In setting the tax base for next year, we've once again made a prudent assumption of an increase in 250 Band D equivalent properties and built in an assumed 336 Band D equivalent properties from the increase in the tax base as a result of the second homes premium being applied from April of next year. We've retained a 1% provision for non-payment as part of the council tax base setting report, reflecting the overall recovery of council tax over time and not to be confused with the in-year recovery rates we achieve. As at the beginning of October 2024, there are 255,000 domestic properties in County Durham subject to council tax. The actual tax base has been calculated at 148,760.6 Band D equivalent properties, an increase of 2,115 or 1.42% on the tax base for the current year. Members will be familiar with the challenges we face in terms of our tax raising capacity because of our low tax base, with 83% of properties in County Durham being in bands A to C and 56% of all properties being in Band A. There is a breakdown of the number of properties by council tax band and the Band D equivalents in totality at Appendix 2, and there's a summary table embedded in the report at paragraph 36 which compares the tax base calculations this year and last. The tax base growth this year will allow the council to include an additional £3.3 million of council tax revenues into our budgets next year, which is higher than the £500,000 increase we had factored into earlier MTFP projections. In setting the tax base, we must also consider the estimated surplus or deficit on the council tax collection fund at the end of the financial year, and we're required to forecast this and declare it what we estimate at the year end by mid-January. This report provides the forecast on the collection fund position at the end of this financial year based on the position to the end of September, where we are forecasting an in-year surplus of around 970,000, which when we add the undeclared position brought forward from last year, will result in a surplus carried forward at the end of this year of 1.806 million, with the council share of that being 1.520 million. We are proposing to declare the deficit position as part of this report. Colleagues at the Police and Fire Authority have been informed of their tax base figures and the position in terms of the forecast surplus on the collection fund to assist them with their budget and MTFP planning. The report notes that next year will reduce the council tax reduction scheme payments to town and parish councils by a further £250,000, in line with the MTFP strategy we agreed when the budget and MTFP 14 forecasts were agreed at council in February. In line with the consultation feedback from the County Durham Association of Local Councils, it is proposed to retain the current methodology for distributing the grant, i.e. recast it based on the annual changes in tax raising capacity across each town and parish council. The letters we sent to the town and parish councils inform them of their tax bases, their share of the grant, and set out a timetable by which we need them to submit their precepts to ourselves so we can factor that into the council tax setting report in February. This is exemplified at Appendix 4 to the report, which shows the individual allocations and impact on the tax raising capacity for each town and parish council, with individual town and parish council tax bases set out at Appendix 3. Chair, the recommendations are set out at paragraph 9. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Can I invite Councillor Richard Bell, Deputy Leader of the Council and Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Finance, to move the report, please.
Thank you, Chair. Setting the tax base and declaring the forecast surplus or deficit on the Council Tax Collection Fund is an important component of our annual budget setting process. Calculating and forecasting this tax base is complicated and requires officers to make prudent assumptions about what will happen over the next 18 months, both in terms of the number and type of property mix across the county, but also on who will occupy those properties. Those calculations have been more complicated this year due to the need to model the impacts of the changes from the introduction of the Second Homes Premium from April 2025. The Levelling Up and Regeneration Act 2023 paved the way for local authorities to consider extra council tax charges on long-term empty and second homes. As members will recall, following consultation undertaken last year, we made changes to our long-term property premium policy this year, and from April 25 we will be applying 100% premium on those properties classed as second homes. It is pleasing to note that the council tax base we will use to calculate our council tax next year shows an increase of 1.4% on the figure we used to set the budget this year, allowing us to factor in £3.3 million of additional council tax revenues into our budget planning for 25-26. I've spoken many times and lobbied government about how this council suffers from a low tax base and therefore has limited council tax raising capacity compared with many other areas. This week at the County Councils Network conference, the council leadership was again energetically making those points. The report today notes that 83% of all domestic properties across County Durham are in bands A to C, which is well above the national average of 65%. This places us at a disadvantage compared with other authorities with high proportions of properties in the higher council tax bands in terms of our tax raising capacity. And put simply, we just cannot generate sufficient income from increases in our council tax on an annual basis to meet our basic unavoidable inflationary pressures, let alone meet escalating demand or invest in improvements, which increases our reliance on central government funding. This central government funding accounts for 79% of our gross expenditure accounts as a council, with council tax only funding around 21%. A 1% council tax increase in County Durham raises just under £3 million of additional council tax revenues for the council, which is about the same as a 1% increase in our pay bill. So as an authority, we are reliant on support from central government through the local government finance settlement. I know members of the public will be frustrated, as we are, that we are having to put up council tax and make savings and service reductions at the same time. This is mainly because of the huge financial strain our statutory social care services are placing in our finances, services that the vast majority of people who live in the county, thankfully, will have no direct experience of. In terms of our future funding position, and I hope this is delivered on, the government has made some positive statements in the budget about seeking to revise the local government grant distribution formula to take into account better need, deprivation and council tax raising capacity, something this council has been calling on for many years. The proof of the pudding will be in the eating on that one, but what is certain is that without a boost to our funding position, we will be faced with a very challenging position across the coming years and have to make some very difficult choices to make in terms of service reductions. As the Corporate Director has noted, the Council Tax Collection Fund is forecast to have a surplus to the year end of £1.8 million, and our share of this is £1.5 million. This report seeks to formally declare the forecast surplus based on the position to September and provide some certainty in advance of the statutory deadline of the 15th of January. The police and fire authorities have been noted of the position we are declaring and their position for budget planning purposes. The report notes that we will be making a £1 million grant payment to local town and parish councils next year, £250,000 less than in the current year, which is in line with the MTFP savings strategy agreed last year. There will be a further and final £250,000 reduction in these payments in 26-27. It is not a statutory requirement, and the majority of other upper-tier councils do not make these payments, so retaining payments at £750,000 once the agreed budget savings are delivered will still represent a significant financial commitment to our local town and parish councils. The individual town and parish tax bases and the overall position is set out in some detail in the appendices to the report, and officers have already written to clerks to inform them of their tax base and grant allocations. With that, Chair, I'm happy to move the report and the recommendations as set out in paragraph 9, and I thank the Corporate Director and his team for this important report.
Thanks, Richard. Can I also add my thanks to those of Councillor Bell, to Paul and his team for the report. The report is quite technical and complex, but its content are an important element of our budget setting process. The policy changes agreed last year following consultation will help bring empty properties and provide an incentive to owners of multiple properties to bring them into use also. These are policy decisions mirrored in the majority of other councils now. It is pleasing that the tax base has grown and shows a 1.42% year-on-year increase, though as Councillor Bell has identified, our council tax raising capacity continues to be inhibited by having a low tax base in comparison to other areas, with a much higher proportion of properties in the lower council tax bands here in County Durham than elsewhere. Having made the statements about seeking to address the inequities of the current grant regime, I sincerely hope that these promises are seen through and acted upon by the new government, as this council has for far too long been at a financial disadvantage and borne too high a burden in terms of its underlying position. With that, I am happy to second this report and ask Cabinet to agree the recommendations set out in paragraph 9. Is there anyone else wishing to speak on the report? No? Can we agree the report and its recommendations?
Agreed.
Okay, I can confirm the recommendations are agreed. We'll move on to item 5, which is a Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act 2000, the annual review of the Council's use of powers. Can I invite James Etherington, Deputy Monitoring Officer, to present the report, please?
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. This report presents a summary of the Council's use of RIPA powers during 2023-24 and the outcome of the annual review of the Corporate RIPA Guidance and Policy, which is published on the Council's website. The 4 operations for directed surveillance and/or covert human intelligence sources undertaken throughout the period are summarised at paragraphs 14 to 33 in the report. These operations related to investigations in respect of illicit tobacco products and counterfeit goods. Members will note that the operations have resulted in some significant outcomes, which really demonstrate the benefit of using RIPA powers. The Director of Legal and Democratic Services continues to chair the quarterly RIPA Officers Group in her capacity as Senior Responsible Officer. Membership of the group includes those making and authorising RIPA applications, as well as representatives from across council directorates who require an awareness of surveillance matters, particularly in relation to the use of social media. The report summarises that training has been provided to and by the RIPA Officers Group throughout the year and confirms that the annual return to the Investigatory Powers Commissioner was submitted within the required timescale in January 2024. In relation to the annual review of the corporate guidance and abridged policy, there are no changes to legislation and therefore the proposed amendments are relatively minor. These include amending a job title and referring to the 3 officers who were authorised to approve RIPA applications at the end of last year. The only substantive change proposed relates to the authorisation for using social media in investigations. Currently, the guidance requires all use of social media to be authorised. However, advice was received in relation to a case that clarified authorisation is only required if certain criteria are met. Accordingly, the Council has introduced an assessment process to consider the proposed use of social media against the privacy expectations set out in the Home Office Code of Practice. The outcome of the assessment determines whether authorisation is required. Therefore, it is proposed to amend the wording to reflect that authorisation may, rather than will, be required for the use of social media for investigations. The report was presented to the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Management Board on the 28th of October, who welcomed the report and agreed to recommend the proposed changes to the Corporate RIPA Guidance and Abridged Policy to Cabinet for approval. Chair, the recommendations are at paragraph 11.
Thanks, James. Can I invite Councillor Richard Bell to move the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. I welcome the opportunity for Cabinet to review the Council's use of surveillance powers under the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act 2000 over the period 2023-24, and as has been noted, this has already been considered by overview and scrutiny. We are one of a few authorities across the country to make regular use of directed surveillance and, where appropriate, covert human intelligence sources. And these powers are a helpful tool in the Council's armoury to investigate and prevent the sale of illicit tobacco and/or counterfeit goods. The outcomes of surveillance operations are set out in the report, demonstrate the benefits that the appropriate use of RIPA powers can provide to ensure the health and well-being of our communities. It's an expectation of the Investigatory Powers Commissioner that the Council reviews its corporate RIPA guidance and published policy every year, and I'm pleased to note that no significant changes to these documents are required. The most substantial change, as has been said, is in relation to the use of social media for investigations, is in response to a change in Council procedure which requires an assessment of privacy considerations in accordance with the Home Office Code of Practice to determine whether or not authorisation is required. I'm pleased, therefore, to move the recommendations as set out in paragraph 11 of the report.
Thanks, Richard. Can I invite Councillor Mark Wilkes, Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Neighbourhoods and Climate Change, to second the report?
Thank you, Chair. The Council has an important role in preventing the sale of illicit tobacco and counterfeit goods. Such activity has harmful effects on the health and well-being of children and young people, is linked to antisocial behaviour and, in some cases, organised crime. The ability to use RIPA powers to investigate these criminal offences, educate retailers and, where appropriate, take enforcement action is crucial to improving the lives and health of residents. I'd like to thank all of the officers involved in overseeing the Council's surveillance arrangements and for using the powers effectively to protect our residents, and I second the report, Chair.
Thanks, Mark. Is anyone else wishing to speak to the report? No. Can we agree the report and its recommendations? Agreed. Okay, can confirm that the recommendations are agreed. Item 6, Highways Asset Management Plan, Condition and Funding Update. Can I invite Alan Patrickson, Corporate Director of Neighbourhoods and Climate Change, to present the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. This report provides Cabinet with an update on highway investment and condition data through the Highways Asset Management Plan, or HAMP for short. It's good practice to produce a HAMP on a regular basis to ensure that our highways maintenance policy is both up to date and understood, and to provide an update on investment and asset condition. The HAMP sets out the long-term data-led plan for managing the highway network. The HAMP contributes to good governance for asset management and goes towards maintaining our British Standard accreditation under BS 55001. It also helps us comply with the National Code of Practice for a well-managed highway. The HAMP consists of two documents, the policy document and the annual update. The policy document sets out our approach to highways maintenance, how we comply with the Code of Practice, how we manage risk across the network, and our approach to life cycle maintenance and inspection. The policy document does not change significantly over time. However, it's important that it is reviewed, maintained, and approved for release into the public domain. The second part of the HAMP is the annual update, which sets out information relating to inventory, investment performance, innovation, and public satisfaction. This document has been substantially revised in both format and tone since the previous version to provide information in a more user-friendly and informative manner. With this revision, we have now sought to bring the document to life with additional explanation, real-life examples highlighting projects, case studies with outcomes. The budget section of this report shows the annual budgets, both over time and in year, which reflect the increasing investment in the highway asset over recent years, and also highlights the effect of inflation and how this has impact on outcomes. The carriageway section shows that the condition of the highway is in line with our agreed approach by prioritising both the classified network and the unclassified network. We've managed to keep the classified network above the national average while focusing more investment on the unclassified network. This focus has resulted in an improvement of the condition of the unclassified network, with the percentage requiring attention dropping from 22% in 2022 to 17% in 2024. The section also highlights significant projects, including the ongoing A690 carriageway stabilisation work. The footway section highlights the issues related to the national digital rollout and the impact that this has had on investment to ensure that public money was not wasted on footpaths that would be opened up later in the national digital rollout programme. The structures sections notes that our 1,500 structures are generally in a fair condition and notes how structures will be prioritised on a risk basis. The report also refers to the £5 million that's been invested in developing feasibility studies for a systematic, planned and practical approach towards maintenance prioritisation. Also highlighted here is the Walton Bridge refurbishment, a project of national historical significance. The street lighting section highlights the street lighting energy reduction programme, which has been successful but which is now coming to an end. And the drainage section highlights not only the £1 million investment from the Council, but also the wider regional work with partners including the Environment Agency and Northumbria Water through the Northumbria Integrated Drainage Partnership. The public perception data shows that our performance is steady against national data, with some downward trends to be mindful of against accessibility, communications and transport. Chair, the recommendations in paragraph 7 to note and approve the HAMP policy and annual update.
Thanks, Alan. Can I invite Councillor John Shuttleworth, Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Highways and Rural Communities, to move the report, please?
Thanks, Chair. I'm happy to be bringing the Highway Asset Management Plan to Cabinet today, which demonstrates the Council's continued commitment to maintaining and improving our network by investing in highways and infrastructure. The highway network represents one of the highest value Council-maintained assets. It's used by everyone who lives, works and visits our county. Its condition and sustainability remains a major priority for us. We can see from the data presented in this plan that the investment made in recent years is now paying dividends. The condition of our network remains good in comparison locally and nationally, and our own classified roads, which we targeted for improvement, have made a step change for the better. We've delivered out on our promise to make a real difference across the county. And I say that if you drive into Northumberland or Cumbria, you do see a difference. We're not complacent, and work continues to ensure that County receives as much funding as possible for the highway network. We are working regionally to ensure that highway funding is secure. We welcome the additional pothole money announced in the recent budget. Maintenance of highway structures is always challenging, but we have introduced more systematic risk-based funding into this area. We have a number of significant projects underway, including the A690 embankment on the other side of town here and the historic Walton Bridge in Teesdale. I commend the work being undertaken by our highways teams in delivering a quality service. The HAMP underpins this work by clearly setting out a policy and establishing the conditions of our assets, which helps to ensure that we're delivering the right treatment at the right time. With that, I'm happy to move the report, Chair.
Thanks, John. Can I invite Councillor Mark Wilkes to second the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Chair, this Highways Asset Management Plan is an important document for the Council. It sets out clearly and openly the areas of strength in our highway network and all excuse me, and also the areas that we need to be looking at closely in terms of further highways investment. This administration committed to improve the condition of the network with a focus on unclassified roads, which were identified in previous plans as requiring attention. We've achieved this goal and made the improvements that we promised. This is despite the challenges of high inflation and spikes in material prices. We've remained focused on outcomes and improvements for residents, businesses and visitors. This report also reflects the forward-looking nature of our highway service and shows the continuing innovation of our council. In Durham, we laid the first net zero road in the region and possibly the country, using technology developed here in the county and deployed by local contractors, supporting both innovation and the local economy as well as the climate. We have deployed AI in supporting our highways inspectors, and we have trialled nature-friendly street lighting in support of our biodiversity and nature recovery. This council remains committed to improving the condition of our highways and structures, and the annual plan provides the information and the framework to do this effectively. Chair, in the last few years we've invested more money than ever before in our highways, and I'm sure we'll continue to do that. And having travelled to Lancashire to visit my family a lot, I can tell you it's not just the two counties you mentioned, Councillor Shuttleworth, where we are streets ahead. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Mark. Is anyone else wishing to speak? Can we agree the report and its recommendations?
Agreed.
Okay, I can confirm the recommendations are agreed. Item 7 is Community Engagement Review. Can I invite Amy Horhoff, Corporate Director of Regeneration, Economy and Growth, to present the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. This report provides an update on the Community Engagement Review project, which was commissioned by Cabinet in 2022. It sets out a series of recommendations for the new governance, funding and branding arrangements to replace area action partnerships with local network models. The new model aims to improve the focus on community development and enhance the capacity of local communities and individuals to become more involved in improving their area. Local networks will adopt a more strategic approach to their work and develop 4-year local action plans to guide investment. These plans will identify opportunities for increased joined-up working between local network partners and other council services. They will also help deliver the County Durham Inclusive Economic Strategy. The new operating model will replace the existing 14 area action partnerships with 12 local networks aligned to the outcomes of the recent local government electoral boundary review. This will provide clearer data sets to inform investment decisions, ensure that county councillors only cover one local network area, and create more consistent population sizes for a more equitable allocation of budgets. The reduction will also help meet the required medium-term financial plan budget savings. The local network boundaries are set out in the report and have been subject to public consultation over the summer. Based on the outcomes of that consultation, there was one change to the initial proposal, where there was an overwhelming feedback that Pelton more naturally aligned to the local network that covers Chesterley Street rather than the proposed area for Stanley. The report also sets out the new governance arrangements and funding guidance for the local networks, including terms of reference that define the purpose, structure and functions. It also provides funding guidance that will underpin the move to a 4-year planned approach to ensure improved strategic spending and free up time to focus on community development activities. Approving the recommendations set out in paragraph 10 of this report will ensure that the new model will become fully operational in May 2025 to ensure that the 4-year local network planning cycles are also aligned to future electoral cycles, helping to drive targeted and strategic approaches to investment and improving local outcomes. Chair, that concludes my report, and the recommendations are listed and set out in paragraph 10. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. One question has been received on this item from Councillor Chris Lyons. Can I invite Councillor Lyons to ask his question, please?
Thank you, Chair. During the consultation about the proposals for local networks, I submitted some comments and concerns via the survey. Having read today's report, my concerns do remain. The existing AAP within which the Sedgefield ward sits has been successful, in my view. Although diverse, the settlements are well connected and not of hugely different sizes. In recent years, decisions about priorities and investment have been made collaboratively, leading to a fair distribution of funding. I believe that every town and village in the AAP has had a voice and has benefited from the work that it does. Under these proposals, each of the communities in the Sedgefield ward would be dwarfed by the size of Newton Aycliffe, and I'm worried about the consequences of that imbalance, particularly when decisions are made about the local network action plans and the allocation of budgets. I also note the irony that these proposals are being made so soon after the physical connection of a bus service between the Sedgefield ward and Newton Aycliffe has been discontinued. I find it hard to accept that the County Council expects these communities to work together in this new local network when residents cannot even travel directly from one to the other on public transport. It is also worth noting that many young people from along the East Durham Rural Corridor attend Sedgefield Community College, another obvious connection between those communities that does not exist between the ward and Newton Aycliffe. If these proposals do proceed, then safeguards must be put in place to prevent the local network funding budgets being mopped up by individual areas within each network. I believe that these safeguards must be embedded in the terms of reference and grant guidelines for the local networks. I may have missed it, but I can't see anything in the draft terms of reference that prevent local network funding being allocated in its entirety to one part of a network. In the case of the Aycliffe and Sedgefield local network, there will be 7 councillors in the patch, 5 of whom will be from the Aycliffe divisions. This could have implications when votes are taken at local network panel meetings. I should clarify that I have no grievance with Newton Aycliffe or indeed its elected representatives. I think that the issue of effective safeguards is a matter of principle that should apply everywhere. My current AAP has tended to allocate budget by consensus, but that may not be the case elsewhere, and there's no guarantee that it will carry over into the new arrangements, especially in an era of reduced budgets for this type of community support, which could precipitate more competition for what there is. To be clear, I understand that investment should generally be steered towards the areas where there is most need, but every ward has examples of those. I applaud the proposals to streamline the process for allocating and distributing both local network funding and councillor grants, but in doing that, we must ensure that the system is fair and that monitoring and evaluation measures are robust. The points that I have just outlined were key components of my submission to the consultation. I have seen nothing in today's report, and as I say, I may have missed it, and especially in the draft terms of reference and grant guidelines that addresses my concerns. Can officers and cabinet members reassure me that robust safeguards will be put in place to ensure that the distribution of local network funding in each network cannot be dominated by a single town, village or electoral division? Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Can I invite Councillor Alan Shield, Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Equality and Inclusion, to respond to the question, please?
Thank you, Chair. For the benefit of clarity, I'm responding on behalf of the Portfolio Holder, Elizabeth Scott, who is unable to attend Cabinet this morning. And can I thank Councillor Chris Lyons for his question. One of the key principles driving the move to a new local network model is, of course, to ensure that the funding is spent in a strategic way and is used to address locally agreed priorities. The local network plans will guide spending over 4-year periods. This will ensure that funding is used to tackle issues that have been identified as priorities across the local network area, and safeguard spend being disproportionately going to a single area, unless that has already been agreed on a specific priority for investment. The 4-year funding cycle will also allow more time to be spent understanding an individual area. The local network approach will ensure that, prior to any use of funding, local networks will have the strengthened information that we will have access to through the alignment to new electoral boundaries. This will be combined with wide-reaching community engagement to ensure a full picture of the opportunities to improve the whole area for all those who live within it. It also should be noted that neighbourhood budgets are aligned to individual local ward members, meaning that is already a healthy proportionate level of funding that is likely to be spread across the whole geography. As a final point, whilst the local network budgets do provide a very useful level of local investment, local networks are much more than funding vehicles. They are about harnessing the resources within a community. Although Durham County Council is offering a level of funding and devolution not available in most local authorities, the funding is modest when set against the wider council and partner investment that takes place in every area of the county. It is also about added value. By guided funding through 4-year investment plans, it will allow us to better align different funding strands and maximise the outcomes for our communities. This will also help in resource planning for the interventions to support the delivery of the local network plan. I hope this explanation clarifies the concerns raised by Councillor Lyons. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Alan. Can I thank Councillor Lyons for submitting his question and for attending this meeting? Can I invite Councillor Alan Shield to move the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Again, I'm proposing the report on behalf of Councillor Elizabeth Scott, portfolio holder for Economy and Partnerships. I'm pleased to bring the Community Engagement Review report to Cabinet today to highlight the proposals for a new, revitalised and stronger engagement mechanism for the Council to properly and effectively engage with our communities, communication being the main principle of engagement. This report will deliver real change in how we support, engage and listen to our communities, how we involve them in shaping the decisions which directly affect everyone's day-to-day lives. The local network structure has endeavoured to address the concerns raised in relation to the current operating procedures of our area action partnerships. For example, to provide a level of consistency and compliance to protocol, we have revised and strengthened governance and terms of reference, reinforcing the need for political neutrality and ensuring the appropriate declarations of interest. To ensure transparency and consistency, we have improved and strengthened the guidance and processes in relation to associated local network funds and county council grants. And finally, to promote further engagement with our communities, we have increased opportunities for involvement through enhanced and targeted community development activities. On behalf of Cabinet, I would like to thank all of those partners and stakeholders who have taken part in the engagement and consultation process, and for their dedication and valuable contributions, and also to the AAP staff who throughout this period have continued to maintain the high level of service delivery we are all accustomed to. We must look forward to the future and the hard work that has gone into reshaping such a valuable service, which I hope will be recognised by our communities and council alike. I move the report as tabled and presented, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. Can I invite Councillor Susan MacDonald, Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Digital Customer Service and Procurement, to second the report.
Thank you, Chair. The Community Engagement Review has carried out a substantial amount of work to understand the Council's main community engagement function of the AAPs and provide a more strengthened and improved arrangement to meaningfully engage with our partners, stakeholders and communities. This new structure will improve how the Council engages with our communities and provide better opportunities for wider and more effective engagement. I'm confident that the measures outlined today will build on the strengths of our area action partnerships and provide more improved and innovative ways of working. I look forward to the implementation of the new local networks and seeing the positive outcomes they will deliver for our communities going forward. I therefore second the recommendations highlighted in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Susan. Is there anyone else wishing to speak on the report? Can we agree the report and its recommendations? Agreed. Okay, I can confirm that the recommendations are agreed. Item 8, Biodiversity and Non-Designated Heritage Assets Supplementary Planning Documents. Can I invite Amy Horhoff, Corporate Director of Regeneration, Economy and Growth, to present the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to seek Cabinet's approval to commence a second stage of consultation on the Biodiversity and Non-Designated Heritage Assets, SPDs. The SPDs support the County Durham Plan, which was adopted in October 2020, and once adopted will be a material consideration in planning decisions. Turning first to the Biodiversity SPD, this provides guidance to improve biodiversity delivery within new developments, and it sets out the following: what the Council expects to be included and addressed within planning applications in relation to biodiversity, a design guide on how to build biodiversity into development, guidance in relation to the requirement introduced by government this year for most developments to achieve a minimum of 10% net gain in biodiversity and guidance on habitat regulations and appropriate assessment. The Biodiversity SPD will help the Council address the ecological emergency declared by the Council in April 2022 and ensure compliance with the Council's strengthened biodiversity duty under the Environment Act of 2021. Turning to the non-designated heritage assets SPD, this contributes to how we recognise and identify the local character and distinctiveness of places we call home or visit. Non-designated heritage assets are buildings, monuments, sites, places, areas or landscapes that contribute to the local heritage but that do not meet the criteria for designated heritage assets such as listed buildings. At its meeting of the 15th of November 2023, Cabinet agreed a local list of such assets for 8 pilot areas across the county and for the development of internal governance arrangements to further identify non-designated heritage assets via the production of an SPD. Accordingly, this SPD explains what assets are, what they are in the context of the national and local planning policy, and establishes a selection criteria against which the county's non-designated heritage assets are identified and assessed. In terms of the consultation, if agreed, a second stage of consultation will be undertaken on the SPDs from the 25th of November 2024 to the 12th of January 2025. All consultations will be undertaken in accordance with the Council's Statement of Community Involvement. Cabinet is therefore recommended to agree the consultation on the 2 SPDs and agree the delegated powers as set out in paragraph 6 of this report. Chair, that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. Can I invite Councillor Mark Wilkes to move the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. When we brought the first round of consultation forward on these supplementary planning documents, I said that these kind of documents can seem pretty dry to people. They might think they're not necessary or not relevant to them. Actually, they are. And this second round of consultation, let's give it a bit of a boost, and I urge residents to get involved and support them, including Councillor Bell, who I'm told was once a member of the British Hedgehog Preservation Society. And I'm sure will be joining in the consultation on the Biodiversity SPD. Chair, far too many developments are taking place across the country where ecology and the environment are not being properly considered. The Biodiversity Supplementary Planning document makes sure that in the future our county will be leading the way protecting at-risk species and our wider environment. Each individual point in the Biodiversity SPD is important, including those small basics of expecting provision for integrated bird boxes on new developments or a requirement for developers to provide access for hedgehogs in fencing. Possibly the first council in the country to include this protection, and I'm sure the Hedgehog Bakery in Bishop Auckland will be delighted to hear that we're including protections for hedgehogs. The SPD also makes sure that if someone trashes the biodiversity on a site, they'll have to fix that by improving biodiversity beyond the original state when developing. It matters, and it stops the unscrupulous in their tracks by setting the biodiversity start date way before any future planning applications. Whilst we recognise the limitations placed on us by national planning guidelines, we also in the Biodiversity SPD put out a call for developers to consider going beyond the minimum national standards whenever they can to further improve biodiversity, making our planning policy one of the strongest around in promoting the protection of the environment, including, of course, our prickly friends. I formally move the report, Chair.
Thanks, Mark. Can I invite Councillor Shuttleworth to second the report, please?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm seconding this on the basis of Councillor Elizabeth Scott not being able to attend the meeting today. These documents being considered today give additional detail and clarity on what's required for new development to be acceptable, expanding on the policies of the County Durham Plan and providing certainty for developers and reassurance for residents. The Biodiversity SPD supports our response to the climate and ecological emergencies. It will help ensure good design and sustainable development. And therefore, happy to second the report, Chair.
Thanks, Jan. Is there anyone else wishing to speak to the report? You don't want to, Richard?
No, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Can we agree the report and its recommendations, please? Okay, I can confirm the recommendations are agreed. Item 9, there's no other business for this meeting. I'd like to thank everyone for taking part and to those members of the public and media who have watched the meeting online. That concludes the meeting. Thank you.